Conway On The Record. This is the official podcast of the Log Cabin Democrat. My name's Drew Mitchell, and I am your host. With me today is Andy Robertson. You are the sports editor of the Log Cabin Democrat. Andy, welcome for the first time.
Thank you.
And our very special guest, Mr. Brad Teague, the athletic director of the University of Central Arkansas. Brad, thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely, Drew. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I understand you actually have to catch a flight here before too long as well, so thank you for fitting us in today.
No problem. Thank you. Proud to be here.
Well, we're proud to have you. And obviously today we're talking a little bit about UCA sports, and there's a lot to talk about there. But sometimes as we get into these podcasts, we like to kind of let people get a chance to know you, kind of your background. How did you find yourself to be the athletic director of the University of Central Arkansas? I guess is a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely, Drew. So I was at the University of Mississippi at Ole Miss, working in athletics, and I was in fundraising there. It was called the Ole Miss Loyalty Foundation. And this is in the late 90s, early 2000s, and my alma mater, Delta State University, had their athletic director position open. And so I applied and was fortunate enough to receive that job and work there for 4 years. And at that time, the University of Central Arkansas and Delta State were in the same conference, the Division II conference of the Gulf South Conference. And UCA, started making rumblings about moving to Division I in the mid-2000s. And so I was a part of that conference and just remembered a lot about that happening. And also, we would come to Conway for our basketball games. So I was always fond of this campus and of Conway. And so when their position became available, John Thompson was the athletic director here in 2006. He had replaced Vance Strange, who's still in town and a great man. And John Thompson left to go to Ole Miss, ironically, to be the defensive coordinator for Ed Orgeron, who was the head coach there at that time.
I've heard he's done some things since.
He's done a few things since, that's right. And so John Thompson left, and the then President Lou Harden was here, and I had met President Harden at our joint meetings, for the conference, and I applied and got the job and have been here ever since. So that's been 14 years now. And we love it here.
Oh, it's a wonderful city and a wonderful campus. In the last 14 years, I mean, the growth of the University of Central Arkansas has been something cool for me to watch. I've only been here about 10, but y'all just done a tremendous job with athletics and the campus in general.
It is beautiful. You're right. It's a pleasure to be here. And really, when you think about the student athletes that we can recruit here, I mean, it has a lot to do with this city and with our campus and the beauty of it. So, and certainly the academic offering. So we're lucky and fortunate to be on this campus.
Well, it's y'all do a great job. I'll let Andy take over here because he is a lot more knowledgeable about generally everything that we're talking about today. Andy.
Yeah, so I know the big news is the move to the ASUN, but I wanted to get out ahead and just talk about you guys playing fall football, getting ahead of everybody else, getting national attention. Like, how did that go for you guys?
Yeah, Andy, that's what it's been stressful, to play in a pandemic, but also that did so much for our university and our brand nationally. So we're proud of what we did, and really the credit really all goes to our president, Dr. Houston Davis, to allow us to do it. I mean, he had to be willing and had to have a campus which was open. There are plenty of colleges that still do not have in-person classes, and certainly we are one who does and which does. So proud of what he's allowed us to do, and then our medical staff, and we have a partnership with Conway Regional Medical Center, and so we're on a call with them every week to talk about testing and talk about vaccinations, but back to the fall, it was all about testing, and can we have access to testing, and can we get results quickly, and can we mitigate any issues, and can we be in a bubble? And those are questions that nobody could answer back in the summer. Mm-hmm. And we decided, well, we don't have the answers. Why are we quitting? Mm-hmm. We don't know yet. We really don't. So we said, well, let's play until the virus says we can't play anymore, and that we find these answers that say you can't do it. And so we decided to play, and we really thought if the SEC and the Sun Belt and the Big 12, all the FBS conferences in our footprint, Conference USA as well, if they were going to play, then we ought to play too. So we were comfortable, let's move ahead, and then all of a sudden our conference, the Southland Conference, decided to not play. And that was really devastating. And the issue for many members in our conference was that they could not get testing. They didn't have a partnership with a local hospital like we did. They couldn't afford testing was the other issue. I mean, testing is expensive. It's typically around $90 to $100 per test. We did over 6,000 tests in the fall, and at $90 a test, I mean, you can easily see that gets to $600,000 in costs. And there were a lot of universities that decided not to play in the fall because of that cost. Fortunately, our institution and our leadership had enough forethought to say, well, the government had just issued this CARES Act funding. Mm-hmm. And we're using CARES Act as an institution to cover the cost of tests for all students. Now, we were the most significant cost in athletics, but they used the CARES Act funding to cover the cost of all tests for all students, athletics or not. So fortunately, that helped us not to have to worry about our budget and the impact that it would have been on our budget, especially because of COVID. We cut $1.5 million from our $15 million budget. We had to cut 10% already. If we also had to find $600,000 for testing, it would have been problematic. I could see where, well, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. And then again, many couldn't even get the testing, and if they could get the testing, results were coming back a week later, and you just couldn't maintain a bubble with that kind of turnaround time. Mm-hmm. So we were very fortunate that we could do all that, and so in our conference, the day they announced that we were not going to play fall sports, we announced that we were going to play fall sports. So we moved ahead. Obviously, we lost, of our 11 game schedule, we lost 10 of them. Mm-hmm. Right then, 9 of them were conference, and then Missouri was a non-conference game, and the SEC decided to play only conference football games, so we lost the Missouri game as well. So we were looking for 10 games, and we scheduled 9 of those 10 and played 8 of them. Mm-hmm. The last one, the 9th game, Louisiana Lafayette, they canceled the week of because they had too many COVID positives.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, it was exciting. It was stressful. We didn't want to play in the spring, and I said it was because of health and safety concerns, which is really ironic to say because here we are playing in a pandemic.
Right.
But I think, and you're seeing it now, I mean, there are a lot of coaches and athletic directors talking about opting out of the spring because if you get hurt in the spring, you're also going to miss the fall, mm-hmm. typically, if you have a serious injury. So it's just difficult to try to manage. And many of these similar programs to us, the FCS programs, they played 3 or 4 fall contests, and then now we're playing 6 or 7 or 8 spring contests, and then they're going to play 11 in the fall again. Mm-hmm. And that's just a lot of football,
right.
Consecutive semesters. So that's not something we wanted to do, and we're proud of what we did.
Yeah, I was reading an article this morning talking about, the playing in the spring and then again in the fall could bring up injuries, mental health. I mean, there's a lot of issues that could go on playing that many games within one calendar year.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was our thought process. And we didn't really know in August if we were going to look back and think and be proud of what we did, but we are now. We're proud that we played.
Yeah. Plus, football in like April just sounds weird, doesn't it? I mean,
it does. There were games on yesterday, right?
Yeah.
That were supposed to play on Saturday, but then the weather pushed them to Sunday, and I didn't even think about it. I just, it's not on my mind to go try to watch, and I would love to watch some other FCS programs play.
Sure, yeah.
But it's just not something I'm thinking about. Maybe March and April we'll think about it, but I'm thinking I'm going to be watching the Masters and baseball and softball, and
there's so many other things going on.
Yeah, it's just odd.
It is odd.
Everything's odd.
It's so odd. And we just got out of a snowstorm. I feel
Right.
like I've been in the house for about a month and a half. Y'all are the first people I've seen in so long. It's nice to have other people to talk to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you've made mention in previous interviews that not playing in the fall kind of set up this move to the ASUN.
Yeah, so, it's a lot of things. And I think that our conference, we have 7 Texas institutions. We have 5 Louisiana institutions, and then us for 13. And there's always been a little, I don't want to call it a rift, but there's a divide. The Sabine River, divides Texas and Louisiana. And there's been differences of opinion on a lot of issues for a long time in our conference between Texas and Louisiana. So the pandemic, forcing us to go virtual on every meeting, for essentially a year now, didn't help that situation. It really didn't. And so I could see we were having all of our votes were going 7-6, 8-5, and there just was not consensus on anything. And so I could hear rumblings among those Texas schools talking about, wanting to leave and go to a new conference. So it started making us think about, well, if those 4 left, there would be 9 schools left. We would be one of the 9 in the conference. And then now the footprint would still be Corpus Christi, San Antonio, New Orleans, but you would be driving past 4 other schools that we used to play. And that just didn't make a lot of sense to us. That wasn't the footprint or the conference that we had signed up to be in, and we didn't want to remain. So we started looking at options. Didn't know that there would be many options. Now, we were asked to join those 4 Texas schools in the Western Athletic Conference. They have teams in Seattle, Riverside, California, Phoenix, Arizona, Southern Utah, Chicago. We thought that's just too much travel. There's we just can't do that. Now, the Texas schools will say, well, we're going to play in division, so really you'd only play those sports, most of your sports in Texas until you went to the playoffs. But we still thought, well, here's something we can do that we could find something fresh, something new, something exciting. And we thought going east, Andy would put us in what we call the football footprint. I mean, the SEC, the Sun Belt, that's where football is played. And so going east, we felt like was better for our branding. We are now picking up major new media markets. Now, we're losing Dallas and Houston, but we're picking up Birmingham, Nashville, Louisville, Lexington, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Florida. I mean, there's just a lot of new spaces, and we've been recruiting more east anyway. We still go to Texas, obviously, great fertile recruiting ground, but we've been recruiting more east. We've gotten a lot more football players out of Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. Now we can go Georgia, a lot more in Tennessee. So we're excited about this happening for us, and the fact that the ASUN, which has never sponsored football, now they have some schools that play football: Liberty, Kennesaw State, North Alabama, and Stetson play football, but they don't play in the ASUN.
Right.
Liberty's independent FBS. North Alabama and Kennesaw State play an affiliate member in the Big South Conference, and then Stetson is a non-scholarship program in the Pioneer League. So none of them play in the ASUN. So the fact that we are a founding member of the ASUN will pull Kennesaw State and North Alabama back out of the Big South to join with us, with Jacksonville State and with Eastern Kentucky. And just think about those brands of football right now. I mean, Eastern Kentucky has as many playoff appearances as anybody. They just haven't been really good this decade.
Right.
They'll get that back. Kennesaw State's been as good as anybody outside of North Dakota State this decade. Jacksonville State's been almost equally as good. They've been to a national championship and lost to North Dakota State in this decade. And then North Alabama, there's not a better Division II football program, really. Valdosta State and North Alabama is what we've always talked about. So add us, who's been pretty darn good as well in football, and you got really a core of 5 extremely strong football playing institutions. And our goal is by 2022 to have 3 more and have 8 total football playing institutions in the ASUN. And so that's the ultimate goal for us. And they have to be really good football playing brands in our geographic footprint, in that same one that we just discussed with those 5. So you could probably figure out some of those institutions that we're targeting, and we think we can get that done. 10 of our games were announced yesterday at the press conference in Atlanta with the ASUN, and part of that ASUN press conference was to talk about our new football league of our 5 ASUN members, but also talk about our 2021 one-year-only partnership with the Western Athletic Conference, which does include 4 of the members from our Southland Conference, our previous schools. So we'll see some familiarity for a year with those 4 schools. We'll also see some new members, Jacksonville State, Eastern Kentucky, that will play as well. And then we have our other 3 already set non-conference games, which were we go to Arkansas State again. We go to Missouri State again. Coincidentally, we did that this year as well. And then we have Arkansas Pine Bluff coming to Conway. And so we're excited about those non-conference games.
All right. Do those future non-conference games you guys have scheduled out, are those affected at all by this?
No, we'll keep those as well. Okay. The good thing is typically conference schedules are later in the season, right. And so you can go ahead and secure those early contests with non-conference teams, September dates.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is not just a football move. You guys are moving all of your sponsored sports, which includes men's soccer, which is played in the Missouri Valley and in Sun Belt. So you guys will play in one
Yeah, we're moving all 18 sports. That's right, to the ASUN, and fortunately, the ASUN sponsors men's soccer. So here we go. First time we've been in a conference that also sponsors men's soccer. So we're happy about that. As you said, we were in the Missouri Valley Conference for 8 years. We actually got kicked out of the Missouri Valley Conference. Had won their tournament and their championship 2 years in a row. We got kicked out, not because we won. We got kicked out because they had added Valparaiso into the Missouri Valley. Valparaiso sponsored men's soccer. They had their 6 teams for that automatic qualification, and they didn't want any more affiliates, so they asked us to leave. And so we were fortunate enough to join the Sun Belt Conference, who needed soccer teams, and we were there for 2 years. Now we're going to the ASUN, and they have 8 or 9 soccer playing institutions already. So excited for everybody to be in the same league and have these great divisional schedules, and just love that travel going east.
Right. I think I read somewhere that the Southland has an exit fee. Or how are financials with this move?
That's right. So typically leagues have entry and exit fees. And so the ASUN, since we're founding members of this new football conference, they have waived all entry fees.
Right.
And their fee was $700,000. So that's waived. Now the Southland Conference is, not as generous, of course, because they're probably not real happy that we're leaving. Their exit fee is $300,000. So we'll have to pay that.
Okay. So you mentioned before in another radio interview or something like that this could set up a move down the line for you guys to move FBS. Is that still on the horizon?
There are a couple options there, Andy. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we are studying and have an interest in seeing if it would make sense for our institution. So the ASUN Football 5, which may become 8, there's a chance that many of those members are thinking FBS, and maybe the ASUN then could take the whole league to the FBS. If that's not the case, we could do an independent status, and we certainly would think that being in the Sun Belt Conference eventually would make a lot of sense for us, since Little Rock and ASU, even Monroe is really close. I mean, there's a lot of FBS programs in the Sun Belt that make sense for us. Lafayette's not far for us. I mean, we travel along I-10 all the time. So that's certainly something we're looking at, Andy.
Yeah, and then there's been talk about the Power 5 schools eventually making their own conglomerate, and does that affect any of what you guys are trying to do?
Yeah, that's again a great question. I don't know what that would mean. That would be, I think, devastating for the rest of Division I. And I say that because if the Power 5 formed their own league, and let's say that was all sports, right? The Power 5 did all sports. Now what happens to the NCAA basketball tournament, which funds 90% of the NCAA budget is that one basketball tournament? What happens to that now? Because the viewership's going to follow the Power 5, and that's where the revenue comes from, is TV revenue. So what would that leave, the rest of us in Division I? But if they did football only, now they're really already doing that in the postseason. Their college football playoff is only a Power 5. Right. It's not NCAA. The bowl games are separate as well. So if they did football only, I don't think it would affect us as much, the rest of Division I. Now, whether or not we're FCS or FBS when that happens, I don't know if that would matter. Right. I still think everything trickles down to the rest of the Division I programs, whether they're FBS or FCS.
Right.
Did you say that 90% of the funding comes from March Madness?
It does.
How devastating was this past
Last
year?
Terrible.
Oh, my goodness.
We are all funded at, I think we ended up with like 39% of normal revenue from the NCAA because they had lost that. Now, they had a catastrophic insurance policy, but the numbers were like, they normally get about $800 million a year off that tournament, and then their insurance policy was $250 million. So we all had reduced distributions.
Yeah, just challenges that I hadn't even considered before.
That's right. So that's why you see them trying to figure out how to make it happen this March.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. 2 years in a row would be.
It would be devastating. You'd see programs shuttering. I mean, it would just, you got to have that extra revenue. We get $1.3 million a year from the NCAA, and again, most of that comes from their basketball tournament. And this year, but because of COVID and they didn't have the tournament, we got like $400,000 instead of the $1.3 million. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a big loss.
Yeah. So in terms of RPI and net ratings, what does this do for the transition?
Yeah, this is for basketball. So women's basketball still does an RPI, and the other sports do RPI. Net is for men's basketball only, and the ASUN's a better basketball league. So we've got to step up our game. We've got to figure it out, and I really believe we're there. We had, it's an odd year anyway.
Right.
You've got postponements and cancellations, and it was all COVID. Now it was weather, and we've had significant injuries as well, and we've had other folks who had to sit out for concussions and COVID, and every team has injuries. I get that, but it really has affected our play this year, but we got to get better. We've got to play better, and got to be a lot better basketball program.
Well, this is fascinating. Brad Teague, again, thank you so much for joining us here today, and everything y'all do over there at the University of Central Arkansas, and especially this year. I know the challenges have been unprecedented for the past, I guess it's been a whole year since COVID really broke out.
We started hearing about the pandemic, or not, it wasn't a pandemic then. We heard about the virus. I guess, what was it, January, we started hearing about it, and then February, you've got some cases in the United States, and you still don't think it's going to travel to Arkansas. It's not going to happen, but here it comes, and now it's March, and you're just wondering, can we make it through the spring semester before anything shuts down? And gosh, it was basketball tournament week of the Southland Conference, and it's the Wednesday, and we have this it's Wednesday, like March 11th, and we have this athletic director call, and we're talking about, should we not allow fans for the tournament? And we're like, well, what time is it? That's 4 o'clock. Well, the game's at 5:30. Fans are coming in right now, so we can't stop it tonight. But I tell you what, for the rest of the tournament, we'll not allow fans. We'll just play it without fans. Well, that Wednesday we played 2 games with fans, and that night the NBA canceled their season. And so we're hearing about the Ivy League cancels their season, and then other conferences are canceling. And so Thursday morning we get on a call, and not only we're not allowing fans, we cancel our tournament too. And then that afternoon, the NCAA, this is that Thursday of that same week, the NCAA comes out and says they're canceling March Madness and the rest of the spring season for all sports. And so we had baseball traveling. They had taken off to Thibodeau on that Thursday. Women's golf had taken off to a tournament in Atlanta. I had to call them, tell them, turn around, come home. The season's over. It happened that fast.
It was just an avalanche, and it all came. Yeah, as soon as the NBA did their thing, then everything fell down. But y'all did a terrific job. What a year! Again, Brad, y'all all, I guess, did a great job over there at UCA. I'm looking forward to seeing sports come back. I'm looking forward to the tailgates being back at UCA. When I was in radio, we used to go down there every year and broadcast, and it was always so much fun. So hopefully
that's awesome. Yeah, you know what? They'll be back. They'll be back this fall. I have a lot of confidence that we'll be able to. We probably will have to show up in masks and distance somewhat, but I think that hopefully we'll be getting real close to herd immunity at that point, and we can have sports like we are accustomed to having them.
Well, I look forward to it. Brad, thank you so much for joining us here today. Is there any websites or anything we should get out before we get out of here?
Yeah, all of our information is at ucasports.com. You can get all of our information about contests and stats and what's upcoming, and then certainly buying tickets and giving donations. It's all right there for you. So appreciate everybody checking that out.
Fantastic. Again, Brad Teague, the athletic director of the University of Central Arkansas in Conway, Arkansas. This is Conway on the Record. Our podcast is available wherever you get your podcast: iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, YouTube. You can check us out there. We will have this available on Thursday, March 11th. Or did I get that wrong, Frank? That's the next one, isn't it? Yeah. I do that every podcast.
You think ahead a month.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I'm ahead of my. That's right.
I like it.
It's not disorganization at all. From all of us at Conway on the Record, thanks for joining us today. And if you like what you hear, which you know you do, give us 5 stars. We love you. Love us back. I'm Drew Mitchell. This is Conway on the Record.